Okay, good afternoon to everybody here from Spain at any time, wherever you are. I am Blanca Bazaco, and I am here in the name of the section on Archive and Human Rights of the International Council on Archives to present the December talk on archives and human rights. So I am very pleased to introduce Giulia Barrera from Italy. She has worked for 25 years in the Italian Archives Directorate and currently heads the Agency for Archival and Bibliographic Supervision of the larger region. Between 2003 and 2006, she acted as advisor to the Public Prosecutor's Office in Rome in a judicial investigation into 25 Italian citizens who disappeared in various Latin American countries in the 1970s. The trial, she was called to testify as an expert witness and was asked to describe the documentary evidence on the existence and functioning of the Condor system, better known as Operation Condor or Plan Condor. Well, as you probably know, Operation Condor was a secret illegal cooperation agreement among Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay in 1975 to track down and eliminate political opponents who had taken refuge abroad. After the 1973 coups in Chile and Uruguay, thousands of opponents from these countries fled to Argentina, which already hosted a wide community of Paraguayan refugees. In the following years, thousands of Argentinians took refuge abroad as well. Due to the Condor system of cooperation, was abroad, political opponents still were not safe from being forcibly disappeared at the hands of intelligence operatives of their own countries. Hundreds of them, in fact, were tracked down and killed. A few of them had Italian citizenship. During the past decade, Italy tried military personnel who, as part of the Operation Condor, were responsible for disappearing and killing Italian citizens and convicted 11 Uruguayans and 3 Chileans. Giulia Barrera testified at this trial using archival documents to provide evidence of the functioning of Condor. So let's hear Dr. Barrera's role for archival documents in the Italian Condor trial. So wherever you want, Giulia, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Blanca. And thank you very much to the colleagues of the Human Rights Working Group who organized this event. And I'm now going to share with you my screen so that you can see some slides that I prepared, which I think can help you understand my broken English. Now, where is it? Here it is. Are you seeing my screen now? Are you seeing the screen?
Yes,
okay.
We see it. Yes.
Okay, good. So it's working.
Yes.
So this okay. So I'm going to talk both about the archives in the trial, the use of archives during the trial, but also of the trial archives, so produced by the trial. So the organization of this talk is, if we first, once again, briefly summarize what the Condor system was. As Blanca already mentioned, it's better known as Operation Condor in English, or Plan Condor, Operativo Condor in Spanish. But in archival documents produced by its organizer, it is called Sistema Condor, Condor system. That's why I prefer to use this expression. I will then briefly describe the Italian trial against the persons who created and ran the Condor system. And then I will describe which documents were used by the judges, were mentioned in the verdicts issued by judges in this trial. in the first instance trial and then in the appellate proceedings. And then I will briefly discuss some issues concerning the court file, the case file. Okay. And so let's start, because it's a long, it's a lot of material, and so I will start right now. And please interrupt me if there is something incomprehensible, or you cannot understand my pronouns and so on. Very briefly, just to remind you, Latin America, the southern corner of Latin America was, all of the countries in the 1970s were under military dictatorships. Here's the dates of the dictatorships. The oldest was in Paraguay, and then Brazil, which had a leading role in the area. And then the last one in Argentina, the military coup in Argentina was in '76. And as Blanca already mentioned, many refugees had fled to Argentina from neighboring countries before '76. And so the other Condor countries wanted to be able to hit those refugees. So the Condor system was created intentionally to do this kind, to carry out transnational repressive operations. The Condor system was a secret and illegal intelligence cooperation program among Southern Cone military dictatorships aimed at exchanging information about subversion and carrying out repressive operations, including forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings against subversives who had taken refuge abroad. I put subversives in inverted commas because the notion of subversives by these military dictators was very wide. Basically, any kind of political opposition to their governments, including from former members of parliament, or people from centrist or moderate social democrats, or what a wide spectrum, political spectrum. In fact, two of the first victims and most renowned victims of condors were two Uruguayan members of parliament who were killed in Buenos Aires in '76. Key point of the Condor system was that intelligence agents, intelligence operatives from Condor countries were allowed to station in other countries and carry out repressive operations in other Condor countries. For example, in 1976, Uruguayan military officers from an military intelligence seized Uruguayan refugees in Buenos Aires, kept in a clandestine detention center run by Argentine Intelligence Service, SIDE, where Uruguayan military officers tortured and interrogated such Uruguayan refugees, illegally transferred them to Uruguay, where most of them were killed. Some of these refugees were Italian. The Condor system was created in '75 under the impulse of Chile intelligence agency, DINA, which was Pinochet's most trusted repressive body. The head of DINA, Manuel Contreras, invited his counterparts from Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Uruguay to a working meeting at the end of November '75. And the creation of the Condor system was decided during this meeting. This is the letter of invitation written by Contreras, which was found in the so-called archives of terror in Paraguay. More precisely, these are the archives of two Paraguayan police bodies. In the same archives, it is also preserved the agenda for the meeting. Both documents were used as supporting evidence in the Italian trial about the trial. Now I'll show you another couple of images from the agenda because it helped to understand how the Condor was a structured system of cooperation. We're not talking of an individual, a single operation, isolated event. We're talking about a permanent structure of cooperation. There had been already before occurrences of repressive cooperation among southern dictatorships, but after the creation of Condor, such a cooperation became structured and systematic, even if it was secret and illegal, even according to the laws of such countries. And I like this image also because it mentions the creation of archives, the use of archives by military, by intelligence services in the activities under the Condor system. The proceeding of this meeting was also found, this time not in Paraguay, but in Chile, and was published by a Chilean newspaper years ago. The countries that participate in the Condor system, as already mentioned by Blanca, were initially in 75, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay. Brazil waited a few months before deciding to join the Condor system. And in 78, also Peru and Ecuador joined, but Ecuador never carried out any operations. So in fact, nobody from Ecuador was indicted in the Italian trial. The victims of the Condor systems were hundreds. I mean, by victims of Condor systems, I mean political opponents who were made forcibly disappear or were killed while they were abroad in another Condor country under, at the hands of intelligence agents of their own, or military officers of their own countries of origin. So you see, we're talking about the biggest group was that of Uruguayan who were made forcibly disappear in Argentina, or in some were killed and their bodies, their corpses were found, and also, Chileans in Argentina, Paraguayans in Argentina, Argentinians in Uruguay, but also in Brazil, and so on. Why was there a trial in Italy against the persons responsible for running the Condor system? Because according to the Italian Code of Criminal Procedure, Italy has jurisdiction of the killing of an Italian citizen committed abroad for political reasons. And some of the Condor's victims held dual citizenship. They were Italo-Uruguayans, Italo-Argentinians, Italo-Chilean. In 1995, their family members reported their death to the Italian authorities because in their countries, the law prevented the judicial investigation of such crimes. In all such countries, there were different kinds of laws that for a long time prevented investigation and criminal procedures about crimes committed during the dictatorship. You might remember that in '98, Pinochet was detained in London under the initiative of a Spanish judge, Baltasar Garzón, a Spanish prosecutor. Now, this fact gave the idea to family members of disappeared persons that maybe European judicial authorities could, provide justice when the judicial authority of their own countries didn't do it that. So they filed, requests for investigation. They reported those crimes to the Italian judicial authorities for this reason. Italy allows for trial in absentia, unlike many other countries, but with full guarantees for defendant rights, including paying, the government would pay for a public defender. However, the trial can be held only if defendants are notified the charges. And therefore, the cooperation of the authorities of the country where the defendants live is essential. If the authorities of the country where the defendant lives do not cooperate and do not notify the accusation to the defendant, we cannot, the trial cannot take place. So that's why it took a very long time before the trial actually started. The prosecutor completed the investigation and filed the indictment in 2006, and the trial started only in 2015. All the years in between were lost, pressuring the authorities in Condor countries so that they would notify the accusation to the defendants. Okay, is that clear? The 2006 indictment was against all the persons responsible for creating and running the Condor system, including the top military and political leaders and heads of intelligence agencies. So heads of states, Pinochet, and heads of intelligence services, Pinochet, Contreras, Fidel, etc. Intelligence officers who carried out the operation, so detain, torture, and presumably kill the victims. So the defendants total 146. Most of them were from Argentina, and then some from Bolivia, Brazil, from all these Condor countries. When the trial started in 2015, their number had decreased to 33, because in the meantime, many of the defendants had died. And also, in Argentina, the Supreme Court had declared that the laws that prevented trials were unconstitutional. And so judicial investigations of Condor-related crimes had started. And so no defendant was tried in Italy because Argentina carried out trials against them, which is very good. I mean, it's actually much better, of course, if trials take place in countries where the crimes were committed. In order to avoid further delays, also the position of Brazilian defendants was separated from that of the others. And sometimes later also trial against Brazilian defendants started. The trial was in absence of all of the defendants except for one. And so much of the interest of the press, international public opinion, was about this individual officer, the Uruguayan Navy officer, Jorge Nestor Trócoli, who holds dual citizenship, Uruguayan and Italian citizenship, who escaped from Uruguay to Italy in 2007 in order to avoid prosecution in Uruguay. Uruguay unsuccessfully tried to extradite him. And then Italy and Uruguay agreed that Italy would prosecute Trócoli not only for the Condor-related crimes, but also for the charges he faced in Uruguay. And so the Uruguayan state participated as a civil party in the appeal proceeding following the Operation Condor trial in Rome. And the Uruguayan state provided key archival documents. So this fact that the Trócoli was in Italy, escaping from Uruguay, caused a strong commitment by the Uruguay state, and which provided very important archival documents. The first instance trial ended with 8 life sentences, 19 acquittals, and some defendants who died during the trial. The verdict acknowledged the existence of the Condor system, its criminal nature, and its responsibility in the killing of Italian citizens, stated that the highest political and military intelligence authorities of all Condor countries shared responsibility for the Condor crimes, deemed that there was insufficient evidence about the responsibility of what it called middle-ranking officers. The persons who were sentenced to life imprisonment were, for instance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Uruguay, Juan Carlos Blanco, and heads of state, head of military and intelligence from Bolivia and Peru. So why Bolivia and Peru, even if the crimes were committed in Uruguay and Argentina or Brazil? Well, precisely because the judges deemed that system was such a cohesive, Condor was such a cohesive system that all the members of this system shared responsibilities of operations, because in whatever country someone, political opponents would run away, would find refuge, it would be equally heated, and there were, due to the system of functioning of Condor. In 2019, the Rome Appeals Court sentenced all of the 24 defendants to life imprisonment. This year, a few months ago, the Court of Cassation confirmed the verdict by the Appeals Court. Court of Cassation is our highest court. So now the archival documents, I will distinguish between the documents used in the first instance trial and in the appellate proceedings. In the first instance trial, judge used archival documents to prove the existence and functioning of the Condor system. Moreover, archival documents allow to prove that the Condor system was instrumental in the killing of Italian citizens. By contrast, in the appellate proceeding, judges use archival documents to prove the responsibility of the so-called middle-ranking officers. Needless to say, the verdicts were based also on other kind of evidence as well, such as testimonies from persons who had been detained with the victims, other witnesses, of their detention, family members, reports by truth commissions, testimonies by expert witness, verdicts by other courts, etc. In the main archival sources used in the first instance trial where came from the Paraguayan archives of terror, the police archives that we have already mentioned, US declassified documents, the archives of the Intelligence Directorate of the Buenos Aires Provincial Police and Uruguay Ministry of Foreign Affairs archives. Now I'm going to say a few words about each of these archives. Okay, I've already mentioned the so-called archives of terror from Paraguay. They have been included in the memory of the World Register in 2009, and in the description of these archival funds, that appears in the memory of the World Register. It is mentioned that such archives include supporting evidence of Operation Condor activities. We have seen already that the agenda for the meeting and the letter of invitation by Contreras are preserved there, but there are also documents regarding specific repressive operations. For instance, this is a document regarding the detention in Paraguay of an Italo-Argentinian citizen, Dora Marta Landi, who was very young. She was 22 when she ran away from Argentina to Paraguay, where she was detained. Then she was illegally transferred to Argentina, where she disappeared. And in her detention, her transfer to Argentina are both documented in the Paraguay archives and the documents. This was one of the cases discussed in Italian trial. And as you can imagine, this piece of evidence, were very relevant. The US declassified documents. In 1999 and 2002, the US government declassified large amounts of previously classified documents regarding human rights violations in Chile initially, and then also in Argentina. Why did it happen? Again, after Baldassar Garzón in 1998, detained, asked for the detention, of Pinochet. Then, trials, investigations started in other countries. there was a request from foreign judicial authorities to access US governmental sources, archival sources, but also there was much pressure from US public opinion and from Congress to have US governmental documents regarding human rights violation in Chile and Argentina to be declassified. So this pressure was very effective. And in fact, because the documents were, thousands of documents, very relevant in the Italian trial. So let me switch on the light. Yeah. Okay. So here is one of the documents. You can see all these red marks because I prepared it, when I showed these documents during during the trial, when I was asked to participate as expert witness, I included all this explanation of what the numbers and codes and names were, So as you can see, this is a State Department cable that talks expressly about Operation Condor. And mentioned that it is not only aimed at sharing intelligence information, but also carried out assassinations in Condor countries and elsewhere. Another very documents that we used, that I showed to the court during the trial, is from the Chile Declassification Project, is this document from CIA, which again describes quite extensively Condor. Describes the fact that I don't know if you're browsing now the document, that you can read it. It mentions how it has had a data bank and other details about this system. And then the declassified US documents included not only a description of the Condor system in general, but also documents regarding specific individual cases that were discussed in our the Italian trial. The most relevant individual document was this one, a memorandum by the regional security offices of the US Embassy in Buenos Aires, which talks, as you can see, of the detention in Brazil of this Argentina guy called Horacio Campiglia, who's also held Italian citizenship, who was detained in Rio de Janeiro by Argentine military intelligence agents, who then brought him in Argentina, where they were detained in a military camp, Campo de Mayo, and then they were tortured and killed and disappeared. So this is also a very important document for our trial. In the past few years, the US government released new documents on human rights violations in Argentina. No similar declassification project was carried out about Uruguay. The most recent release of documents was called Declassification Diplomacy, because it helped ease tension between US and Argentina after President Obama had scheduled a visit to Argentina in 2019, right on the day of the anniversary of the coup, the military coup, March 24, which was perceived as a provocation by some many human rights organizations. And so President Obama, in order to show that he was actually siding with human rights organization, decided this, ordered this declassification. Now, while am I mentioning this? This declassification project, as I said, in part were, carried out under the impulse of public opinion or political pressure by Congress, members of Congress, but also can be used by as a diplomatic tool. They depend on this kind of political interplay, and in which it can be very important, the role of public opinion, which gives to each and all of us also some responsibility in trying to pressuring our governments. And I would like to underline that no European country carried out a declassification project in any way similar to that carried out by the US government. And in particular, I find embarrassing that in Italy, in a trial concerning the killing of Italian citizens, we were able to use important US documents, but non-Italian, declassified document. And certainly Italian intelligence agencies knew a lot about what was going on in Argentina and other kind of countries. There were strong, economic and political ties, and also the head of the Italian intelligence agencies at the time belonged to a secret Masonic lodge, which had among its members also the strongman of the Argentina military junta, Admiral Massera. So, I mean, they were buddies in the same Masonic lodge, certainly knew a lot, but we couldn't see any single document from that produced by Italian intelligence agencies. Another important archival source for the first trial in Italy were documents coming from the archives of the Directorate of Intelligence of the Buenos Aires Provincial Police, which included detailed records about some repressive operations. For a long time, we thought that in Argentina, the archives concerning the dirty war against carried out by the military dictators had all been destroyed. This is as you can see, a telegram that was sent out in November 83, by the head of the army of Argentina, ordering to the police chiefs to hand out to the army all the documents concerning the repression, so that they could be destroyed, burned. However, we were luckily wrong on thinking that all documents had been destroyed. In fact, some archives survived. I will not expand any further on this issue because there is a very good article by Mariana Nazar that has been recently published in the volume on archives and human rights that has just been published. And so I refer to her article. And another source of indicting documents used in the trial were the archives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay, which provided crucial evidence about the surveillance of Uruguayan exiles in Argentina and of the participation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in transnational repressive operations of political opponents. And in fact, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Uruguay, Juan Carlos Blanco, was sentenced to life imprisonment. And I would like to underline that it was possible to locate these documents thanks to the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Archive Services had professional archivists and started the search since 2005 unlike other Uruguayan archives relevant, regarding, you know, of that period. There is a very good article by an Uruguayan colleague which discusses the problem of accessibility of archives relevant regarding the, you know, human rights violations in Uruguay during the dictatorship, and referring to that article. In the appellate proceeding, it was very important the use of other documents from Uruguay that were open to research by a governmental commission of inquiry some 15 years ago or so. Documents came from the Ministry of Defense archives and of the and then from the archives of the Special Marine Corps, el Corpo de Fusileros Navales, which Troccoli belonged to. I mean, he was an officer, the head of the intelligence of this Marine Corps. And in particular, the personal file of Troccoli was crucial in order to prove his role, his responsibility, the fact that he was a person in a sufficiently high ranking position to be able to make decision about the killing of prisoners. So he was not only executing orders, he and other, you know, officers who were indicted in the Italian trial, middle ranking officers were not only obeying orders, they were making autonomous decisions about the killing of their prisoners. I give you here another example. So personal files of officers have been used already in different other human rights cases and trials in other countries, including in Argentina. So in this case, this is not a document from a personal file, but is a document from Uruguayan intelligence service, which is not very important, the specific content, but important is the signature. This Major Gavazzo was one of the officers indicted in the Italian trial, and as you can see here, he is defined as Jefe of the Condor Op, head of Condor operations for Uruguay. So it's clear that he had hold a position of responsibility. And now we come a few words about the case file. The investigation and the trial produced huge files. During the investigation, the prosecutor collected testimonies from around 100 witnesses, who often gave him copies, handed him copies of documents. During the trial, there were also dozens of witnesses were heard. The Italian state prosecutor received copies of documents collected by other prosecutors as well, from Spain, France, Argentina. There was much cooperation among, you know, prosecutors who were carrying out investigation regarding human rights violation in southern countries. And such prosecutors also had collected thousands of documents. So, for example, the Italian prosecutors never went personally to Paraguay to collect the Paraguayan police archives documents, but received huge collections of documents from Paraguay from other prosecutors. And the Department of State provided printed copy of the Chile declassification project's third tranche. So we're talking really about huge amount of documents. And a case file that had an extremely complex structure with, you know, files in files and files and files, so a kind of Chinese box structure. So this is a very rich source for future researchers, a source that can be very difficult to access for most of the concerned persons because it is overseas. And this is, you know, also the problem in having these transnational case files, you know, transnational judicial proceedings comes out. And also a source that includes documents of very different degree of reliability. I mean, we have documents that have been handed over, to the prosecutors by witnesses, and that not necessarily, are documents of whose archival provenance is clear. And so now they become part of a judicial case file, which grants them, an appearance of reliability, but actually we do not really know where they come from. So that gives a problem of that we have to be very careful in how we handle documents coming from case files. And then there was the file produced during the actual trial. Now, this is a tenet of Article 1 of our Code of Ethics, that we should protect the archival material and guarantee that it continues to be a reliable evidence of the past. But the question is, how reliable is the court file? Is it really a reliable evidence of the trial? This can sound as a provocation, but okay, let me explain you something. Okay, during the trial, most witnesses spoke languages different from Italian. They didn't speak Italian, gave testimonies in Spanish, in Portuguese, in English, okay? Translation was really bad quality. Translators made umpteen mistakes. They're, underpaid. They have not the quality of translation we have in ICA conferences. And they were overworked. The court had the same translator during the trial translating for 3 hours in a row. And, at the third hour, the translator would say Buenos Aires instead of Montevideo, Montevideo instead of Buenos Aires, made umpteen mistakes. They had no clue about what we were talking about. So it's really embarrassing to listen to. Now, what happens, in the trial proceedings, only the translations by the translators are transcribed, not the original statements by the witnesses in the foreign language, okay? Only if a lawyer makes a specific request, the original testimony is retranslated, but no lawyer did it in our case. And I wonder in how many trial court cases regarding, for instance, now refugees coming, from countries that have languages, that speak languages much more difficult to translate than Spanish, similar problems occur. Now, the trial proceedings, the written proceedings, are the trial's official record. But they did not record what witnesses actually said. We can know what witnesses actually said only by listening to the oral recording, which is published online by the Italian radio. Okay, the recording should be also part, is currently also part of the court file. But how well these recordings are preserved in court archives, this is another matter. So when I wonder, I'm very pessimistic on the idea that such recordings preserved in court archives will still be usable in 30 years from now, when they will be, the entire file will be transferred to the state archives. It's very likely that the original recording will not be transferred. Now, in this case, as in other cases of important trials, the trial has been recorded by this radio, and we can listen to it all right. So paradoxically, if we want to know what really witnesses said, we have to go to an unofficial, private radio recording and not to the court file. And so with, opening up this problem of how reliable of our archival sources that we produce in trials, I thank you for your attention and shut up.
Well, thank you so much, Giulia. That was so really interesting and impressive. And with this end, it's just the point. Well, it gives an idea of the importance of our profession, really. Well, I want to remember the participants that you can type a message into the chat and I can read them to Giulia, or use the raise hand function to participate, to ask something to Giulia. Someone has anything to ask to Giulia? All the questions that came to my mind, Giulia, are very personal because but maybe they are interesting, because I wonder how did you feel? How do you carry the responsibility of testifying on such a trial?
Well,
I mean, do you have any doubts? Do you have everything clear? Or even do you feel some pressure, external or internal?
Well, first of all, please consider that the investigation was very much a collective endeavor. So evident, I joined I was actually borrowed by the prosecutor when much of the investigation had already been carried out by him, with the help of the Association of Family Members of Disappeared Persons, who collected, huge amount of documents and, written testimonies and other, important material, books, and gave them to the prosecutor. And basically what I had to do was to read all this huge amount of documents together with Federica Martellini, a young history graduate, and write, sum up what emerged from such documents. And then, many other persons, testified in court. So, okay, I had some responsibility. I found out that when reading the verdicts, that especially the first verdict used quite a bit my statements in the, my testimony in court, but I think simply because mine was in Italian. And there were very important testimonies, for instance, from Carlos Osorio from the National Security Archive, which also described the documents that I described, but he did it in English, and then it was translated. And I think that, the jury and the judges didn't understand much because of that, while they understood more easily what I said. And then also, prepared slides so that, I could be very simple for them to follow what I was telling them.
Giulia, there's also a question from Gustavo.
Yes, I wanted to thank Giulia for a fantastic presentation, really fantastic job. And my question is, what do you think that should happen with these trial archives? Because on one hand, they seem like a fantastic source for research, and I think ideally they should be made available. But on the other hand, you raised rightfully so many doubts about the poor quality of the translations. What do you think will happen with these?
Well, first of all, some documents that have been collected, by the prosecutor are actually already published, such as the Chile declassification project. So luckily, and also many Uruguayan documents, but not all of them actually. We received documents that are not under the public domain in Uruguay and in other Condor countries. They will be accessible, to individual scholars, even before the court file is transferred to archives, to the state archives. This will happen only in 30 years' time. So the president of the court can authorize individual researchers when the file is closed, to see it. So in actually, journalists or historians can access it, but it will not go, as a bulk online for a long period. Then some documents were, given to the lawyers of the defendants or the family members and so already made it to circulated. So now there is a website by an Italian NGO that published the proceedings. They are already all online in this website called 24 Marzo, under the date of the coup in Argentina. So they are all there. So you can, if you want, you can download the proceedings and the verdicts and the proceedings from this NGO and then confront it with the recording from the Radio Radicale of this radio and see what the difference is between one and the other. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you. It's quite complex. Yeah, indeed.
Oh, it is.
Thank you.
There are some written questions in the chat, Giulia. For example, they ask about the radio recordings. They ask if they can be transferred to digital version so they can be a future proof. Do you know anything about this? The radio recordings that you have.
So let me see the question. If the
So exactly the question is, will the radio recordings be transferred?
The radio uses sometimes, one of these automated transcription software, which doesn't work, however, with foreign languages. So it's not going to be. Can they be used as in the future? Well, it is possible. Here we should. What can be used as an evidence is a big issue in general. How can I say? It's difficult. It's a very complex issue. Judges are not historians and they're not archivists. So, for instance, they accepted as evidence some documents such as the final act of the Condor meeting, which I showed, that we know only from the published version on a Chilean newspaper. We never saw the original document, which is supposed to come, from the Chilean Minister of Foreign Affairs archives. Now, archivists would, consider this document highly unreliable. But in a trial, a document that is presented as evidence is reliable unless some of the lawyers contest, says it's not good, and then a debate starts. But if no one questions its authenticity, then it's accepted. Can you see what I mean? So we're not confronting, the value of a document against general archival principles, or the principles that historians would follow when valuing the reliability of a document. But the value of a document or any other piece of evidence is decided in the discussion, in the confrontation of different, between the prosecutor, the lawyers in court.
Thank you, Giulia. There is also another question that there is someone that wants to know if the trial records are preserved in the National Archival Institution. Where are these trial records?
Now they are in the court archives. they will be transferred to the state archives in 30 years' time, because in Italy, the general rule is that, governmental documents, state archives are transferred, including court records, transferred to the state archives, the national archives or the local state archives, 30 years after the files closed, were closed. So.
I don't know if anyone wants to say something. There are a lot of felicitation for your work and say that your work should be known in Latin American countries. And there are some people who are sharing its experience.
Hey, Kate. Kate, I'm sorry.
So.
Well, maybe you can read after Giulia the chat. There is a lot of.
So let me see.
No, but I think there's just like commentaries and congratulations for your presentation. There are people who is giving some links to know more about all the things that you have talked about.
So she also. Sepo Mosueo asked how much of the trial will be transferred to the National Archives. Well, the entire trial, the files of the most serious cases, such as murder trial like this one, are entirely transferred to the National Archives or the State Archives. Oh, wow. Someone from the Uruguay, congratulations to the colleagues from Uruguay who are doing a wonderful work during over the past 15 years. Thanks to the research and the commitment of archivists and historians and other researchers in Uruguay, some very important documents are emerging. And then Silvia de Mura, I would like to ask whether the archives are accessible. I don't know whether she's now referring to the archives of the courts or archives in Uruguay and the other countries. The court archives, As I said, the court archives are accessible under specific, they are not public like the documents in the National Archives, but they can be accessed if for a qualified researcher, journalist or so, files a request to the president of the court, and normally access is granted. I don't know what else. I can tell, very interesting, the colleagues from Santa Fe that also have records from 25 parties, provided evidence to archival documents to 25 judicial cases.
There is a new question, Giulia, that it's asking for if maybe now that the original witness statements could be transcribed now and a good translation now.
Well, it is legally possible, but who will pay for that? Certainly not the Italian court. So if and okay. And also, I wanted to raise this issue because, I really think that it's very relevant regarding trials and court cases that are going on now all over Europe and also in other countries in the United States, whenever there are cases concerning asylum seekers who, are heard by, before courts, and their languages, are very remote. During the Italian trial, quite often the judge had to stop the translator and say, please retranslate better what, you know, your translation is incomprehensible, you're mistranslating something, you know, retranslate it. But because, you know, Spanish and Italian are so similar that judges and lawyers could understand the Spanish and could sometimes intervene and, you know, and correct it, what the, you know, translator had translated. But what happens with, you know, with when the original language of the person is, you know, is Swahili, Arabic, Chinese, you know, Yoruba, or, you know, okay, so, you know, Tigrinya, Amharic, and so on, you know. And that is a very big concern, I think, for anybody, you know, who's concerned about human rights.
I think it's, just to say goodbye, Giulia, and thank you in the name of everybody that has had the opportunity to listen to you. That was really impressive and fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everybody for being so patient and listening to.
No, that was perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very special thank to the colleagues who work in the Condor countries and who are making, you know, an amazing job in preserving archival sources, in discovering them and transferring them to archival institutions, and you know, thank you very much, because your work is really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giulia. Thank you, everybody. Bye.